Okay, well, we don't seem to have anybody waiting in the waiting room, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank you for attending Global Caché's February 2025 trading webinar on our products and our utilities. I'm Rusty Keller, Global Caché's Director of Marketing, and I'm joined by our lead engineer and developer, Garrett Gustafson. We have a pretty full hour planned for you where we'll discuss our partnering efforts, product line overviews, and technical aspects of our products, as well as feature how to use our free utilities to make your job easier. We love questions, so please send them using the chat function or just ask at the end of the presentation. The webinar is being recorded, unlike last month's, my bad, and will be available for replay as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint. I'll try and get that out to you and a follow-up by the end of the week. Let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, give me just a second. Who are we? Who is Global Caché? So if you've ever worked with us or heard about us, first and foremost, we're a partnering company. Our mission as a company has always been based on a foundation of partnerships. We do that a number of different ways, which I'll get to a little bit further here, but I think that's really important to understand about Global Caché. We are a piece of the ecosystem, we're a piece of the greater puzzle, and we depend on our partners, both strategic and sales, to help us be successful. Everywhere from our, the end user to installer integrator, to our distributors, to our VARs, to software control systems. Again, oops, I did not mean to do that. So the beginning, we founded this company in 2002. We come from an IT background, a hardware and a software IT background, and we moved into this industry. If you've ever met our VP of Business Dev, Robin Ford, she is, I know Oren is, I see you nodding. You probably know our history, and that's a whole nother presentation in itself, but just suffice to say, we came from the tech bubble in Silicon Valley and moved into smart home and later into the more commercial areas of AV and Pro AV. What we do is we allow any device to be controlled by an IP network for control. And by any, it's not, I'm talking about our core competencies are IR, serial, relay, and contact closure, and Garrett will get more into that. We also have a 3-to-1 HDMI switcher. It's a little bit different. We are based on open systems. Again, that's where our core of partnering comes from. We are nothing without our partners. And when I say partners, like I said before, we have a number of OEMs out there. We have a number of distributors, VARs, and strategic alliances. We have a complete list of our distributors on our website. We do have a dealer direct program available also, so you can always email sales at Global Caché to find out about that. But our stocking distributors are listed up top on the distribution page: BTX, Liberty, and Home Controls as a start. And if you are interested in finding about our partnerships, please send us an email at partners@globalcache.com or sales@globalcache.com. We have been in this business for a long time. When we started this company, I think I had one child, and now my youngest child is turning 22. So we've been here a very long time. We have millions of units field installed. Our original product line, the GC100, which we had planned end of lifing a very long time ago, is still very much an active product and is out there being used like the little workhorse that it is. We have a number of global distribution partners we have throughout the world, and we have a number of global partnerships and alliances. Apparently I'm having control issues and can't get the slide to move forward. There we go. how do we support our global partnerships? And that means everybody along the line, from end user, installer, dealer, distributors, bars, strategic alliances. We do that a number of ways where we have uh, quite a bit of collateral, marketing collateral, and documentation for customers use. I would like to say that we are doing a refresh on our brand. So we're going to be having some new documentation available fairly soon. Along those lines, we're really interested in seeing how end users as well as dealers and installers are using our products. We'd love for anybody to email me, rusty.keller@Global Caché, if you think you might have a case study or use case or something we could feature in an article. That would be really great. We're very interested in those. We do a number of press releases. I'm sure if you've been on our mailing list for a long time, you are familiar with my name and the emails that we send. We do a lot of internal partner recommendations, support. Is always being asked what companies, what products work with us. We used to do a lot of pre-pandemic trade shows, ISE, Infocom, CEDIA, a bunch of partner events. We've shifted a little bit to virtual events, but that will probably be changing near the end of this year and next year. So in order to keep up to date on that, we are also launching our new website soon, which will have all that information and as well as partner events, again, because we're a partnering company. Webinars, manufacturer and partner trainings, and coming soon, our new website. So what is so great about us? What are the features? What are the benefits? Let me have somebody waiting in the lobby. Let me let them in. And the biggest one, I think, is our lower cost. We allow installers, integrators to save money so that they can make money. Another big feature for us is we're customizable. We can be used in lots of different environments. Specifically our Global Connect, which is a completely customizable product with 7 different chassis sizes, 4 different module selections, PoE, not PoE, 2 power switch, or 2 network switch. Garrett will get into that, but it's one of our it's a very cool product. We are agnostic. We don't care who or what your control system or what you're doing. We have open and published APIs, which means we try to work with everyone. We're scalable. We're often called digital duct tape. If you have a hole in your system you need to plug quickly, we are good for that. But also we are an excellent foundation for entire installations, homes, huddle rooms, hotels, stadiums, sports bar, boardrooms, ... you name it. We're future-proof. All of our products are backwards and forwards compatible. We're easy to install, set up, and use, which I hope Garrett will show you. And we have seamless integration with our GC Control Tower. I'm not sure if you are aware of our Control Tower, but it's a free IR database on the web. All you have to do is go to globalcache.com/control tower, and you can register for code sets. You can also register and request a verified account where you can get even more code sets. With that, I think it's all Garrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Rusty. I will be doing a little bit of a product overview. It'll be a little bit briefer than some previous webinars, so we have time to go over the utilities. But all of our products are TCP/IP networked products. So we have Ethernet and Wi-Fi products. And we have a variety of different types of control, some of which Rusty touched on there. So we do things like IR control, sending the commands that your IR remote would, but from the network. Serial control, bidirectional serial, so sending and receiving serial data over the network. Controlling relays, so turning things on and off, or triggering a garage door or a lift. Those types of things, we allow you to network enable those as well. We also do some sensor inputs, so we can sense incoming signals, either the presence of contact closure or the presence of a voltage, so you can get feedback into your system. And then we also do HDMI switching, which is we have a 3-in-1 out HDMI switch, so you can control the switching over the network. as well as inject CEC. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. And as Rusty mentioned, one of the things that really makes us special is that we are agnostic as far as where we work. So we publish all of our APIs, and so we do not have our own control software. We basically partner with other systems that are either the control system or a control app, and they use these APIs to integrate with us. And even if there isn't an already existing integration or driver for our device, because we publish those APIs, if they can do a TCP client in their system or if they can send an HTTP request, more than likely you're going to be able to integrate our devices by using those API commands. And because we are open, we have all sorts of different partners that work with us. So these are just a few that you might recognize, like Crestron, Utelogy, QSys, Elon, Control4, Josh AI. There are many, many more, and we're adding more all the time as well. And even sometimes we don't even always know when somebody adds us because we do just publish everything publicly. Sometimes there's a little lag before we even know that we're supported, which is kind of funny, but it's really cool. So, to get just a little bit into the types of control we do, IR is one of our main types of control. So, anything you're controlling with like an IR remote, a line of sight remote, we can control with our devices. We do the full 32 kilohertz to 500 kilohertz output range there, which basically is the entire range that of all IR remotes that we encounter in the AV world. And that includes like the high frequencies up near that 500 kilohertz, like Bang and Olufsen. They're kind of them and a couple other companies are kind of the oddball up there, but we can do those higher frequencies as well. So you will be able to control those with our devices as well. And we have a couple different types of IR outputs on our devices. We have emitters, which are basically designed to go directly on top of the receiver. Very short range. They're made so that they only control one device. There's no crosstalk. And then we also have some blaster options, which will go long range. Most of our blasters go up to 35 feet, which is about 12 meters. And that allows you to control something if you want to control something across the room or projector in the middle of the room, and you'll only have a device on the side of the room. That gives you that type of control as well. Another really common type of control we do is RS-232. And actually, ironically, even though RS-232 is such an old protocol, we've actually seen it grow in the automation world rather than shrink. I think IR for a long time, IR was our biggest type of control, and I think that RS-232, I believe, has surpassed that in recent years. Um, and we do that through on most of all of our product lines have that available on a DB9 connector, which is kind of the traditional serial connector. Uh, and we support basically sending the data through our TCP API on port 4999. So anything that we send to that goes out on the serial port. Anything that comes back to our serial port goes back on that TCP port. So that makes integrating pretty simple. It's just, pass the data you want to go to the serial device to our unit. We also have HTTP API ways of talking to them on the Flex and Global Connect. And you'll see there that there are a few different like baud rate ranges that we support on the different product lines. Basically, everything is going to, most of the devices we encounter are going to fall between that 1200 to 115.2 K baud. So the iTouch Flex and Global Connect, we like al almost never never in recent history that I think come across a device we couldn't control that was serial. Even if there are devices out there that might do like 230 K baud, but usually those can then be configured to use a lower baud rate because I think the manufacturers of those know that they're kind of going outside of what is a normal serial baud rate, especially for the AV world where things don't generally need to go faster than that. We also do have like some of the extra signals. So at its base, RS-232, you just need TX, RX, and ground to get bidirectional control. But there are also things like hardware flow control that lets the device tell you to stop sending data to it. There are different types of bits you can set in the communication, like parity that lets a device know that it reasonably that it has not received like a corrupted data packet. And we do support those types of things, and we allow you to configure that through the web pages of the units. And if that sounds complex, it's really you just go and you find your serial device you're going to control, and you're going to see it's going to say we need this baud rate. Flow control is yes or no. Parity is even odd or none. And you just set those same things in our device. And one of the we also have on our Flex, which is I will talk about a little bit more, is we also have like RS-45 on that, and we also have RS-232 available in a 3.5 millimeter connector as well. So relays is another type of control we do. Relays can be pretty basic, but they are also very powerful. So we're basically just turning on and off, connecting two wires via network command. But that can be used to do things like screen drops. You want to do a lift up and down, or you want to do a gate controller, open and close it. Most of our products, being like the GC100, iTach, and Flex, are all signal relays, so they're kind of low power relays. They're meant to be inputs to those types of existing devices like garage doors, lifts. We also do have, though, more power relays on our Global Connect relay module. So those will do up to 3 amps, 250 volt AC, so you can actually power things on and off with that. So that even opens up a few more options as well, where you can actually send power to a device instead of just triggering an input. And then we also have some sensor options as well. Each of our product lines has a different sensor option, um, either through a cable or built-in functionality there. So on our GC100, iTach, and Global Connect, you're going to get a sensor cable that's either a contact closure sensor or a voltage sensor, and that will plug into the IR ports on those units, which can then be configured for sensor mode. On the Flex, we use a FlexLink relay and sensor cable, which has relay outputs and sensor inputs. But each of our product lines does have an option for getting sensors. And then the final type of control we do, which is a relatively new one for us, is HDMI switching. So this is a 3 in, 1 out switch. So you have three inputs, one output. You get to select which input is going to the display. And what's special about us is that's network controllable. So you're able to control that from a networked control system rather easily. And it also supports CEC control, which if you've ever put a disc inside your DVD player and then your TV automatically turns on, usually that is CEC. So basically there's a bus that goes through the HDMI cables, and it basically allows like one device to send requests or commands to the display or even to other HDMI devices. So it's a really kind of cool way to be able to control like an entertainment center through just like one endpoint there, and be able to control everything that's hooked up to the display if it supports CEC. So I kind of mentioned some of the product lines. The iTach is the first one I'm going to talk about, and this comes in a few different variants. We have Ethernet, Wi-Fi, and Ethernet with PoE versions of each of these products. With the iTach, we have three different main types of control. We have the relay outputs, which is the far left one with the yellow faceplate. So that gives you three relay outputs, basically just open close relays. Again, really good for doing things like lifts, garage door, gates, things that have an input that we can then basically actuate that input via a closed wire. In the middle there, we have the IP to IR and Wi-Fi to IR, and those have three independent IR outputs. We also have the ability to do a blaster on port 3, which comes with the unit. And those can also be configured for sensor input mode as well and be used with those sensor cables. And then we have on the right there the IP to SL and Wi-Fi to SL, which does RS-232. So it does support, like I said, like flow control, parity, all those types of things. So it lets you control any of your RS-232 devices. So with the Flex, we can do pretty much all the things that we can do with the iTach. But we also have a few additional capabilities. So one of the nice things about the Flex is it's a little bit smaller form factor. So you can hide them away a little bit easier. One of the Big difference is though with the Flex is that it's cable based. So you'll buy the base unit, which is either Ethernet with PoE or Wi-Fi, and then you'll get a specific cable for the type of control you want. So you want an RS-232 cable to do RS-232. You can get an IR cable to do IR output, or like a relay sensor cable to do relays and sensors. One of the nice things with the Flex is like because it is cable based, we can offer some cables. That aren't for control types or form factors that are not available on the other product lines. So for example, we have like an RS-45 cable. So instead of having to get like an RS-232 to RS-45 adapter, you can just get an RS-45 cable that goes directly to RS-45 from the Flex. We also have a 3.5 millimeter serial. So if you just want TX arcs and ground in a 3.5 millimeter connector, that gives you that. And those are really popular with like Samsung and LG TVs that have service ports that allow you to do RS-232 control through a 3.5 millimeter jack. We also have on the relay sensor cable, we have relay output and sensor input on one device. So if you need to do relay output, trigger your lift or your gate, and then also sense when the gate is open or is closed, that gives you both in one unit there. And that would be like the smallest unit that would have both in one there. And then finally, we have our Global Connect product line, and the Global Connect product line is kind of our latest and greatest. What we do with this one here is it is a modular product line. So we have a variety of different chassis that you can build these units into. So you can order these units with a different combination of modules depending on how many of each type of I/O port you need. So we have rack mount enclosures, we have freestanding enclosures, and those go all the way from the 19-inch rack, which is a 10 slot enclosure, all the way down to a 4.5 inch freestanding unit, which would be like a 3 slot enclosure. And each of those enclosures is broken into what we call slots, which is just a section of the enclosure, and then each module can fit into either one or two slots. So on the larger end there, we have 10 slot enclosures. So you could fit one network module with 9 IR modules, for example. Or you could do a combination of IR, serial, and relay. Or you could go down to the smaller size and just do, one network with one relay module that takes two slots. So you can order these specifically with the I/O configurations that you need. And if kind of dealing with slots and enclosure sizes sounds confusing, we do have a Go Configure tool that allows you to basically just specify what modules you want, what enclosure type you want, either rack mount or freestanding, and then it will spit out a part number for it. It'll spit out the an image of what the unit will look like, so you can kind of see what the form factor will look like and verify that you have what you're looking for. It'll also give you a lot of nice little specs about the unit, like the estimated power usage, the box dimensions, basically everything we think you would want to know about that unit will be provided to you from that tool there. So to get into some of the utilities, so we have a variety of utilities, and like I mentioned before, we don't have our own control software, um, but we do have these utilities, and the purpose of these utilities is to make integrating our products easier. So the first one we have is iHelp, and the main focus of iHelp is to discover and update the units. So we want to discover the units on the network, tell you what IP address they're on, give you some information about them, and then we also want to be able to do updates to new releases from iHelp. iTest is the next utility we have, which lets us test commands, and this is really great when you're integrating with like a control system and something's maybe not working and you go, oh, is it my control system configuration? Is it my unit configuration? iTest is a really great way to go, okay, I'm going to send a simple command to the unit, see that it works. Okay, if it works here in iTest, it's probably something wrong in the control system configuration. If it doesn't work in the iTest, well, maybe my serial baud rate's wrong or something else there. So it's a really great way to kind of narrow things down if you need to figure out why something isn't working. We also have iLearn, which lets you learn IR commands. So a lot of our products have built-in learners, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this will let you learn IR commands with those, and then you can then take those and put them into your control system. And then we have iConvert, which is kind of along the same lines, but it converts between different IR formats. So there are a few different IR formats out there in the industry. We try to let you convert between some of the common ones, and then you can then use codes you might have from a previous install or codes that you have from like a community database and get them into your control system and in the format that you need them. So iHelp, as I mentioned there, is our discovery and update utility. So what it does is it discovers the units on the network. It does that through a UDP multicast beacon, which is just something that the unit sends out periodically. And from that, we can get a lot of information from the device. We can figure out what IP address it's on, which is important because a lot of our units are DHCP by default, so they get assigned one. And then we can also update the units from iHelp as well. So generally, where you're going to use iHelp the most is when you're fresh integrating one of our products. So for all of our excuse me, all of our Ethernet products, what we're going to do almost with all of or actually with all of the product lines is we're basically just going to plug the unit in to power and to our network. And then as they are all configured for DHCP by default, they will get assigned an IP address by your router or your DHCP server. If there is not a DHCP server, then they do all have fallback addresses. So 192.168.1.70 is the fallback address for um, most of our almost all of our units there, and then the Global Connect, each of those slots or each of those modules there will have its own IP address, and so it'll be 192.168.70 plus the module number. So first module will be 71, second module is 72, third module 73, and that's so that they're all unique. But iHelp will mostly help us in the case where we are on a DHCP network because we won't know what the IP address is. So it'll let us find the unit and tell us what IP address it's on so we can then change that to a static or just access it for configuration. With our Wi-Fi products, we are going to need to connect them to the network before we would typically use iHelp. So both of our Wi-Fi offerings will create their own wireless network for setup. So with the Flex, it's the soft AP network, which is kind of like just like a normal SSID. And then with our iTach, it's an ad hoc network, which is just a little bit older type of way of provisioning devices. Um, and with those, we do suggest using like iOS or Mac OS for the initial setup for the easiest process, whereas soft AP will work with very seamlessly within EOS. But either way, what we'll do is we will look for the unit's wireless network to show up in your wireless picker. We will connect up to it, and then we're going to type in that default IP address. So for the Flex, we would connect up to the iTouch Flex network there, the SSID that's shown. We would type in the 192.168.1.70 address, and then that's going to load up these configuration pages. If you're on the iTouch, they're going to look a little bit differently, but either way, we're going to be telling it what network we want to connect to and giving it the password and security types that it needs to connect to it. So with the Flex, we get a nice list of all the available wireless networks. If our network is listed, we will just click it. If it's not listed, then we can also type it in manually down below, and then we'll hit the join button. And when we hit the join button, it'll take us to the next page where we will enter in a password for it. So that's our wireless network password. We can also click that DHCP enabled, which will let us disable that and then set a static if we want it at this point. For this demo, we're just going to provision with DHCP and then we'll change it to a static later. And then the security type, if you've chosen it from the list, it'll already be set for you. If you typed it in manually, you would have to specify that. But typically, you're going to be using WPA2 as kind of the industry standard at this point. So once we've clicked join there, the unit will reboot and try to connect to the Wi-Fi, and this is where iHelp comes in because we'll run iHelp on that network there, and it will pop up there, and then we can right click on the unit and say configure, and that will take us to the web pages where then we can either configure the I/O or do the network settings. So in this case, if we want to actually end up putting this one on a static, we can go in there, disable DHCP, put in our static assignment that we've already set aside, and then apply that. And this has been sped up here, but the unit will then reconnect with that IP address. We can go back to the web pages, and then we can configure our I/O. So on the Flex, this one's going to be configured for a relay sensor cable. And that one has configurable relays. So we'll configure those for single pull, single throw, which is just an open close relay. And that's the most common type of relay configuration for those. And then we apply that. And then this unit is now most likely ready to be integrated with the control system because we have the network settings the way we want them and we have the I/O settings the way we want them. So usually everything else from there would then happen in the control system. So the other main function that iHelp does is updating units. And the way that we know an update is needed is through the icons on the oh, I forgot to turn off the remote control there for Rusty. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I hit the wrong button. Just a moment, guys. Oh, okay, that cleared the remote control. Okay. So the way we determine if an update is needed is through these icons on the left. And I actually am not on the right slide here, so let me go back. Okay, there we go. So yeah, the icons on the left there. If we see a green check mark, that indicates the unit is up to date and it's operating normally. If we see a yellow exclamation mark, that usually almost always means an update is available. It could also indicate a minor issue with the unit. Most of the time, if it's a minor issue, it's something that would also be solved with an update. So either way, you're generally going to, first step is going to be if you see that yellow exclamation mark is to update the unit. And if we do hover over that yellow exclamation mark, it will give a description of why that yellow exclamation mark is there. In this case, we see firmware update is available for your device, which is exactly what we want to do for that unit. So to update that, what we're going to do is we're going to select the modules or units we want to update, and then we're going to right click on it and say update. And that'll open up another dialog where we can start the update. And this will take a few minutes. We've sped it up for this one. But these will all update. And once they're all complete, we can close that out. And then the units, once they reestablish communication with iHelp, will then update to show that green check mark saying that the update was successful and that everything is good with the unit there. Um, so yeah, and if you do now, as I mentioned before, the iHelp does use the a multicast UDP multicast beacon to find the units. If you were to find yourself in a situation where iHelp was not finding the units automatically, we do have a solution for that. So you would go to iHelp and you would right click and say add device by IP address. And then we would just type in the IP address of the unit that you might have gotten through an IP scan, or if you already had a static assignment on this one. And then this one's already up to date. We're going to update it anyways. So we right click, say update. If you're doing just one, it looks a little bit different, but the process is the same. Start the update, and then we just wait for it to complete. And the reason that you might need to do this would basically be if, for example, UDP multicast was disabled on the network. We do see that sometimes where the IT department will like lock that down. And what you generally do then is use an IP address scanner to find the units, and that would tell you the IP addresses of the units. Typically, if you're like in a home network or in a network you control, it's not going to be a problem, but it's good to know that you do have an option if for some reason iHelp does not find the units for you there. There is a way to get them added so that you can update them. So this one is getting near the end of its update. This one is not sped up, so you get to kind of see the full experience here. But in just a couple seconds, we'll see that it completes, and then we can close out here. Looks like I should have sped this one up just a little bit. My talking was a little bit quicker there. Okay, yep. So we get that date complete, exit out, and then we're done with the update. So with iHelp, we can also get some information about the units. So if we right click, say details, this will give us some information. We can see what the firmware version is. So if you want to know what firmware version you're running and compare that to the release notes. We can also in the status see any errors would show up there. And they would be pretty evidently errors, so that you can see those there. And then if our support ever asks for the beacon dump, they'll probably tell you how to get it, but that's where you get that as well. And then there are a few other context menu options. The most useful would probably be this blink LED, which allows you to blink an LED on some units. So if you want to know where it is in a rack, you don't know which unit it is, that's an easy way to locate it. And then we also have an update all devices option, which can let you update a bunch of units if you have a really large install, without having to do them all, select them all individually there. So iTest is our testing utility. So again, it lets you kind of take things outside the control system and kind of isolate problems. And the way it does that is by connecting to our TCP API, which is basically just an API where we connect up to a TCP port, and then send a string, a command to the unit. And so we have a few different ports that our devices operate on. The most used one is port 4998, which is going to be for all of our IR commands, our relay commands, also any of our configuration commands. You don't have to configure our units through TCP API. They also have the web interface, but it is possible to do so. So if you're playing with that, this is where you do that as well. And then we have our port 4999, which is for all of our serial data. Basically, with that one, it's really simple. Anything we send to that serial port goes out our actual physical serial port. Anything that comes back on the serial port comes back on that TCP port. So it's just the device is a simple serial pass through, just translating network to RS-232. And then we also have port 5000, which is used on our older GC112 that has two serial ports on one IP address. Same deal as 4999, but just a second serial port there. And the main parts of iTest are this command string field, which is where we're going to type in our commands, and then the response fields where we can see what comes back from the units there. So let's kind of run through if we were to test an IR command. What we would want to do is connect up to port 4998 because that's where our IR commands go. And we would just put in our IP address of our unit. We're going to click connect, and then we're going to get our IR code. We want to get that in the global cache format, which is the send IR format. So we're going to go ahead and just copy this one from one of our database emails there. And we go ahead and paste in the command string and we send it. And then you get the complete IR response there, which tells you that it's been transmitted and it worked. We could also hopefully see that that display turned on, for example. Now, if we change this to port 2 and send it, oh no, we got an error. So if you get an error on a command, you hit this error codes button. If you drag over that window, it will tell you what that error means. And this is on a global connect, which says it's not supported for that port. So if we query this port, which you don't need to know this command, you can also check it through the web interface. We can see that this port is actually configured for a sensor, so that's why we got that not supported error there for that one. And we do have, I know I am going to be going through some of these pretty quickly. We do have support articles for kind of testing IR commands, testing serial commands, testing relay commands, on our knowledge base. So feel free to look those up if you ever, whenever you're using iTest there. So if we want to go ahead and test a relay device, we would just change to our Global Connect Relay module here. So we're going to change that IP address using the same port. And then we would type in our relay command. So this is going to be in our TCP API. It's also going to be in those knowledge base articles. It'll tell you exactly what to put in there for each relay. and we sent this, and it gave us a proper state response. If we change that last value to 3, we get an error. If we do the error code again, we say, oh, that's an invalid state because 3 is not either on or off for our relay. So if we change that back to a valid state, okay, now we get a good proper state response. And also, hopefully the relay went on and then off when we sent those two relay commands as well. So to do serial communication, we're going to do a very similar thing. We're going to change it to the serial port, which is the port 4999. Going to put in the IP address for our serial module here on the Global Connect. And then this port is actually, we have a loopback connector on it, which means that we've tied transmit and receive physically on the outside of it together. And so what that's going to do is we're going to get anything back that we send it. So that's really good for this demo. It's also a nice troubleshooting thing if you really don't want to see that the data is going out and coming back from your device. But let's go ahead and pretend like we're sending a real command here. So if we send that, we go, okay, we sent power equals 1. It came back from the loopback. So that's exactly what we'd expect. Now we notice there is a 0D, which is a carriage return. We might not want that on our serial command, so we can remove that by unchecking it. We also might, with serial data, need to send some other non-printable characters. So for example, if we wanted to, if our documentation said we needed to null terminate our command, we could do that and do this \x00. The ASCII response, the printable part is still the same, but this unprintable character we can see is 00 in the hex format response. And then also with serial, a lot of times you might be dealing with just hex commands. So here we're going to do a bunch of non-printable characters, and we send those. And as you can see in the ASCII response, completely not readable. But if we look at the hex format response, it's exactly what we sent there, exactly what we expected. So those are just kind of some ways you can kind of send serial commands to the device. Really good way to test your serial devices easily through iTest there. So the next utility we have here is iLearn, and iLearn is what you'll use if you want to learn IR commands from your remote. Um, we all our iTouch, Flex, and Global Connect all have built-in IR learners, and you can see the learning positions there are highlighted in those photos. The only one that has a little bit of a trick to it is we do have two versions. We improved on the iTouch, made a larger hole for the learner to make learning a little bit easier on some of the newer versions. So if your iTouch has two holes to the right of the barrel jack, use that top one. If it has one hole, you're only going to use the lower one, the only one hole that exists there. But either way, with all of the learners there, you're going to hold the remote about 1 inch away. And when you're ready to learn, and we'll go through the learning process shortly there, but when you're ready to learn, you'll push that button on the remote from about 1 inch away, and that's how we'll learn there. So what we're going to do with iLearn is we're going to go ahead and select our learner, which product line we're using. So it lists all of our product lines, including our standalone learner, which is a serial-based one. But in this case, we're going to use a Global Connect learner, a built-in learner. So we'll specify the IP address here. We're going to go ahead and connect. And then we're going to go ahead and point the remote at the learner from about 1 inch and push the button, and voila, we get the IR command in there. Now you might notice there's these capture options up here. Most of these are not going to have to mess with because the later versions of iLearn kind of manage them for you. But in this case, we want to change the port to 3, the connector to 3, and you can see that got changed in the actual edit view. And then we can go ahead and click Send IR to test it. That will send it out port 3, just like we specified, so we could see that it actually worked to control our display. And then once we know it works, we can name it and save it. And that will put it in the file that's specified at the bottom, which you can also change by clicking the Change File button. A little bit more on the capture options up top. As I mentioned, the later versions of iLearn will manage those bottom 3 capture options, so you don't have to worry about kind of those finer details anymore. And that works really well in my experience. So I don't really see cases where people need to change those. The ones that do sometimes need to be changed are the module connector and repeat. The module is always going to be one for all of our products except for the GC100, which we'll have for the GC106, we'll use module 2. For the GC112 or 18, we'll use 4 and 5. And those are documented on some support articles as well as our APIs. And then the connector, which lets us choose which port on that module we want to send the IR command out. And then the repeat is basically how many times we send that command. Most notably, that is going to be like if you're learning Sony, we almost always want to set a repeat of 3. Um, Otherwise, most other devices, repeat of 1 is going to work. But if you're not having success with the code that you're learning, trying a repeat of 3 is always an easy step that you can try to get that to work there. And at this point, I do want to bring up Control Tower again. I know Rusty talked about it a little bit, but Control Tower eliminates the need for learning in a lot of cases. You can get registered with an email to get those code sets sent to your email. And we update that periodically, so we are always adding new devices. So it's a very good resource that can avoid learning in a lot of cases, because even though learning is pretty straightforward, with iLearn, if you have to learn a whole remote that, is 20 commands and, might be 20 minutes you could save there, or more depending on the number of commands you need to learn there. And also a lot of all the commands in the database are completely tested as well and uh, trimmed and adjusted, so they're really good quality codes there. So the final utility we're going to talk about here is our iConvert utility, and what this is used for is converting between different IR formats. And it's most commonly used if you have codes from like an old database or from a previous project, and you want to get, or you contacted the manufacturer and they gave you some cryptic document that has IR codes in it. iConvert will hopefully let you convert it to our format or to the format that your control system needs. Um, and the most common is going to be the Pronto hex to global cache conversion. So Pronto hex is kind of a, a long time code format that's been used a lot. So to do this, we will just change from the left. We'll say we're converting from hex to global cache. We'll put in our Pronto hex code. Pronto hex codes start with 0000 and have these spaces in them, so they're pretty easy to recognize. And then, yeah, we'll confirm that we have the right settings set, and we'll hit confirm. And then now we have the global cache format that always starts with a send AR response. We also can convert to and from some other different formats. So, for example, we could go to the Pronto hex format, and we'd be able to copy and paste that somewhere. We can also go to a compressed format, which is a shorter version of the code, good for character limits in control systems. And then we also have the GC JSON, which is used with our HTTP API. So you just need to convert to that if you're using our HTTP API. So that pretty much wraps up our utilities. So with that, I just want to recap with the kind of what can you do with global cache. And a lot. You can do a lot of things you can imagine. So you could, do a lot of home theater devices, AD devices. We get used in like stadiums for the displays. Conference rooms have a lot of AV devices. RVs might have all sorts of things, motor controllers, entertainment centers. Uh, we also get used both in home and commercial automation areas. So, for example, we get used in like a lot of commercial spaces like boardrooms where there's a mix of AV devices, motorized blinds, all those types of things. Um, we also get used in a lot of school type settings. We have actually a partner, I think, Utility that does this, but their software is used a lot in campus automation. And if we look at this here, like it's pretty easy to see some of the things that we could control with our devices. For example, that projector lift would be a good candidate for one of our relay devices, maybe like our iTouch IP2CC. The projector itself could be controlled with one of our serial units or an IR unit. And then in that podium, there's probably various different AV type devices that we might use, like an HDMI switcher or some IR control or even some serial control. So a lot of things that you could, easily add to a control system with our devices. Another great application for our devices is sports bars. As we all know, there are a lot of displays and AV signals in sports bars. So a really good application for, especially like our Global Connect gets used there a lot, where you could have up to 27 IR ports, which would be 9 IR modules of 3 ports each in one Global Connect if you need that many IR ports to control your displays. We've also been installed in some kind of interesting places. So like the Venetian, the Jaguars Stadium, and the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. We also, because we are the manufacturer, we don't always get to hear about all the really cool places we get installed. So if you have a really cool place that you're installing our devices and the customer's all right with you sharing, please let us know. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open this up to questions. So if anyone has any questions about our devices, the utilities, or anything Global Cache, go ahead and either let us know in the chat or uh, I'm not sure if they can unmute themselves, but if you can, either way, unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Yes, I believe that it is set so that anybody can unmute themselves and actually show their video if they choose to. You can also put something into the chat like Garrett messaged. We'll give you a second, and otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. And like I told you before, we will have this recording available for replay as well as a PDF. You can always contact support@globalcache.com or sales@globalcache.com for any questions you have. Okay, I guess we're done. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all being here. Oh, there's a
Thanks so much.
question.
Yeah.
Do you see that, Garrett?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the chat right now.
Okay.
Okay, so are certain ports required to be open on the firewall to allow you to add GC devices via iHelp manually? When I add a known IP address, it fails in iHelp, but I'm able to access HTTP site of the GC. Okay. So if you're adding by IP address, the communication would be through port 80, which is our HTTP API, as well as port 4998 potentially. So those would be the 2 ports that for adding it manually. Um, for the automatic discovery, it would be, UDP multicast, which uses port 9131 or 32, if I recall correctly.
There's a voltage question too. What voltage is used for your IR blinker?
Yeah, good question. So that does depend on the product line. We have, I believe it's 3.3 volts on the Flex and 5 volts on the Global Connect and iTat or Global Connect and GC100. And then the iTouch is either 3.3 or 5 there. I'd have to double check on that one. But emitters are what we call like current controlled devices. So regardless of the voltage we use, we set the correct resistor value to drive them with about 20 milliamps there for emitters, which gives you good brightness, but also doesn't damage the emitters there. Um, so if you're, yeah, but you do need to know the voltage if you're trying to like go into some sort of like input directly instead of using an emitter there. So that's a good question.
Okay. Is that it? Well, great. We hope we see you next month when we have a new um, or an updated webinar. We'll cover the basics like we usually do, but we'll have a new topic. In fact, if you have an interest in having us explore a certain topic, APIs, setup specifically for certain products, uh, all about relay, whatever you're interested in, we would love to get that feedback. You could send that to me at rusty.keller@globalcache.com if you'd like, or partners@globalcache.com. or support at globalcache.com. Anyway, if you send that to us, we'll definitely take that into consideration as making. We have a list of things that we want to cover, but we certainly would like to know what your priorities are. So if no one else has any questions, I'd like to thank Garrett for all of that great information, and I'd love to thank you for being here. We hope to see you next time. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everyone.